Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're the hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every day, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can view all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues that affect you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
Meeting of the Housing Advisory Committee to order. Joyce, you want to do roll call?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Amagashi. Gerhardt. Here. Gorman.
Here.
McKee.
Here.
Mertens.
Here.
Perry. Farmer Eden. Sanders.
Here.
Schemming. We have a quorum.
Wonderful. I would like to move to approve the minutes of June 10th.
I so move.
Second. All in favor? Opposed?
Oh, wait, sorry, I have a small
Question or correction?
Page 2 of the minutes, bullet 3, it's just a typo. It should be accepted with ACC rather than accepted. And hopefully that can just be a friendly amendment.
Okay.
So you said page 2, bullet 2?
Bullet 3.
Okay.
Okay.
So are we gonna approve them with the change, Michelle?
Are you okay with the friendly?
I so move
Okay.
to accept the minutes as revised.
Second.
All approved? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda, do we have any public appearances for non-agenda items? I don't believe so. And the next agenda item is introducing our new Housing Initiatives and Programs Specialist, Laureen Gage. Hi Laureen, welcome. Excited to have you on board. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So again, I'm Laureen Gage, and I am the new Housing Initiatives and Programs Specialist, and I'm excited. I've been now close to 4 weeks, but I'll tell you a little bit about my background. So I came from Milwaukee, so I've been here in the Madison area about 6.5 years. So in Milwaukee, I kind of worked in 2 sectors, in education and real estate. So worked as an educator for about 15 years in the Milwaukee Public Schools. Primarily special education was my focus. And then I also worked in real estate, and I kind of got that background from my parents. My mom was a realtor, and my dad rehabbed homes in the city of Milwaukee. So we focused on the central city, helping first-time homeowners to purchase homes. And really, my dad, in addition to doing rehabbing, he owned a hardware store, a chain of hardware stores, and that's where he saw the need for changes in home ownership and rental. There were some landlords that were not fulfilling their duties, and lead paint was an issue, security was an issue, pest was an issue, and he wanted to make changes in the community. So I worked alongside him, learned a lot from him in that, and so that's how he became, purchased homes and started rehabbing it. And so as a family unit, utilizing their knowledge and experience, we owned our own mortgage company called Church Mortgage in the city of Milwaukee. And that's what we did. We worked both ends, so helping on the mortgage end, helping, we had our own home buying program to help people to understand credit and finances and once to, the transition from renting to home ownership. And then once, they were able to purchase their home, kind of help them through that process, just understanding, resources that were available to them. So that was our rewarding opportunity to do, and we did that until kind of the market changed. And so I went back to teaching, and then I noticed in teaching kind of the same things that were happening. So a lot of the students that I were teaching, parents would come to me and talk about the disparities in housing. Eviction was a huge piece that they were facing, and so I used my experience and knowledge and try to help them with resources. And I just knew at that point that definitely real estate was my avenue to go. So came to Madison area, worked for Housing Initiatives, which is an organization that helps people that were formerly homeless to find housing stability. And so that was also rewarding. So I led a department of caseworkers helping people to have stability. Moved on from Housing Initiatives and worked for Moving Out, which is another wonderful organization that helps people with disabilities to find home stability. And so I worked managing all of the rental projects throughout the state of Wisconsin. So kind of led me to here. So I just kind of utilized all of that knowledge and experience in working with individuals that really need home and home stability, both on the rental side and home ownership. And so that's kind of what I'm doing now in my role, really learning a lot about Fitchburg, learning about the residents that live here and what are their needs. So more, I think, of these past couple weeks, really educating myself and really making connections is a big piece of finding programs that can support residents. So.
Wonderful. Question for you. So Church Mortgage, that doesn't exist anymore?
It doesn't, unfortunately. I wish I could have, but we couldn't keep our doors open.
Just moving out, how many units do they manage statewide?
At the time, their portfolio, I would say about 15 to 20 projects. Mm-hmm. And I think there's, definitely that was 2 years ago, so it's probably a lot bigger. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that was a wonderful program where there were different, 30% AMI to 80% and then market rate. And then sometimes, just depending on the project, there was mixed use. So really nice. And definitely a partner I would love to work with. So I have actually started to reach out to them and see if they can have any opportunities here in Fitchburg. So yeah, so starting those kind of infancy conversations and seeing what partnerships we can have here.
Great, well, welcome on board. Lucky to have you. I know Joyce, go ahead.
I just want to say how delighted we are.
I bet you are. Joyce and Mike are really appreciative.
Yeah, to have somebody that can just really focus on things, and she's hit the ground running and has just, jumped right in as far as reaching out to people, establishing a network, and, doing all the research of our Fitchburg housing plan, the Dane County plan, and all those documents and everything. So she's a great addition.
I bet.
Mm-hmm.
I bet.
I've tried really hard to, get her to run away, but she hasn't.
Gives her every opportunity to run.
I have. I'm like, you know what? She's getting to know us a little bit more, Arch, and how we work and how we bicker like an old married couple. And
they're a joy to work with, and whatever they're saying, I mean, it's awesome. Joyce is so open to helping me understand the different process levels. So I really do appreciate working with you.
I love working with you. So we're gonna shake things out.
And of course, you already know. So.
I just have to say too, I think your background is just, you have so many different, touching so many different aspects of housing in your background, which I think is amazing. And also just love to have an educator here as well, because I find that educators are the best at explaining and building partnerships, or they're up there in terms of those skill sets. So really excited to have you on board. And I think your background's fascinating, and I think you'll bring a lot to the city.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention I was also school board president for the Monona Grove School District too. So
Which school district?
Monona Grove.
Monona Grove?
Yeah, so 3 years. So I just stepped down actually this year, so.
That's a tough
And
job.
she's a village board member in Cottage Grove, so that brings kind of that other hat, which is kind of really good for us, because we're learning stuff too, like, you know, ways that we talk and things that we share. She's great.
Knows the lingo.
What's that?
She knows the lingo.
Yeah, she complements all the things that we aren't. I mean, because, you know, we have backgrounds, Mike and I do as well in real estate. I mean, I have property management, I have appraisal, I have my broker's license, so we have that kind of element. We don't have the financial end. Mike's like way up there in the, you know, he's even got some acronyms behind his name. So, I mean, it's so cool that we have that person. So we're a very well-rounded team now.
Fabulous.
Plus, she introduced me to Canva today.
To what?
Canva. Right? Yeah, I got the name right? Yeah, yeah. That kind of, you know, we're gonna upgrade our presentation materials.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
But maybe everybody would like to just give a little bit of an introduction of yourself and then the background that you bring to the table, because I just think it's...
I'm Marshall Mertensen. I was one of the board members of the team that interviewed you, and I'm the retired affordable housing developer. And I am so happy that you decided to accept the job because we were so impressed with you.
Awesome.
So I'm a Fitchburg resident and, like I said, retired affordable housing developer. So.
I think I introduced myself at the CETA meeting, but I'll do it again.
Okay.
So Jenny Sanders. I'm a realtor, so that's what my perspective is in this whole thing. So residential real estate. My husband and I own a marketing agency as well. I've lived in Fitchburg for 25 years, I think. So just real active in the community and very invested. So I am very happy to have you here.
Awesome, thank you both.
I'm Mallory Gorman. I've been in Fitchburg for, I think, 3 years. My husband's family's been here for about 150, so he's got a few years on me. We just live down the way.
Robin the Cradle.
He is Robin the Cradle, let me tell you. I was here because I was asked, I worked for Baker Tilly as a tax lawyer. My background is I went to law school. And then in order to understand my real estate clients better, I went to grad school here at the Grass Camp Real Estate Program. I don't remember when that was. That was in the 80s, maybe. And then stayed at home for 25 years with the kids. We have 5 kids and soon to be 11 grandchildren. And then when my youngest was in his last year of high school, I went back to school and got a master's in tax. And then I went to work for Baker Tilly as a tax attorney. And then worked in their construction and real estate department after my last one graduated from high school. Had a great fun doing that and retired during COVID. So here I am. I don't know how long I've been on the committee.
Since inception.
Okay, since the beginning. So that's all about me.
Thank you.
I'm Brian McKee. I'm a lifelong resident, and our family goes back in Fitchburg 1842, so that's like 172 years.
Oh, we went.
Some predecessors of mine, great-grandfather and great-great-great-grandfather were town board chairman. Have Midwest Home, which is residential single-family construction, McKee Associates, which is commercial construction. We've done a lot of the office buildings and some of the buildings here in Fitchburg. We do land development, and I'm also been a real estate broker for 34 or 5 years now too. So kind of all facets of owning, building, developing, selling real estate.
And I'm Gabriella. I'm the older representative for the committee. So my background's in geology originally, but I took a career shift and I now work in nonprofit fundraising. Been in a few places in that area, but I currently am at Habitat for Humanity of Dane County. So obviously working in housing in that aspect, and I've been on the council since April 2020. And really in my campaign, I talked a lot about climate change and public transit, and a little bit about housing affordability, but I think the last 4.5 years has really solidified how much of a crisis housing is in this region. I talk to people all the time. I have constituents that just struggle, and it's when people ask me what the number one priority is for me, it's housing. I mean, everything. There's so many different important aspects of the city, but housing is the number one thing that I think we have to manage and we have to deal with, and having your position join, I think is such an important moment in time for you to join, especially with the Dane County Housing Authority putting together that plan. And with this committee in place, I just think we have a lot of opportunity to get some great work done with all of these amazing experts in the room.
Thank you. Wealth of knowledge in here.
Okay, moving on, we have resolution ordinances of which we don't have any, item number 6. Item number 7 is our Efficiency Navigator program, and the questionnaire that was in our minute packet. This is a memo that's put together by them, correct, Joyce? Right. So we were to look at it and to answer the questions that were proposed to us on page 6 of their memo. I'm assuming we are to have they don't want individual responses, they do. I was thinking they wanted a response of the whole committee.
No,
Interesting.
individual, it's your homework.
Do you want us to turn it into you?
I do.
Or
I actually, to
do we have to
Lorraine.
put our name on it? Or
No, you don't have to
Is
put,
it-
you can
okay.
do
I
it.
already did mine.
Yep, and you sent
I did
yours
mine. I already sent
already.
hers already.
You sent yours in, and I will send that to you. So we have Dan Hardy's and Mallory so far, and Brian. So it was sent out to not only this committee, it was sent out to CETA as they serve as our housing authority, and it was also sent to the council with a noon on Friday deadline to have it turned in so we can share the findings with Sustain as they get ready to, I think they've completed the assessments of the properties that they've looked at.
Yeah, because the apps were closed on the 31st, right?
July 26th.
Okay.
And they had one come in late. But they still picked them up anyways. And we meet every other week. And are we meeting this week? We're meeting Wednesday morning to get an update on where we're at with the intake on the last one. And then once they get the prioritization, I have a hard time saying that word sometimes, then they will start getting more concrete data and recommendations on which projects we as a community want to move forward.
Now who's going to pass on the assessments? I mean, does city council then look at those?
So no, the assessments are a private document between the property owner and Sustain Dane. But then they'll also make recommendations based upon that assessment. I have some notes from our last meeting.
So right now, you said there were 10 property owners, 16 buildings, and
About
16
plus
units.
Yeah.
15 buildings.
So, maybe this isn't.
Right now, the property information remains kind of private, between Sustain Dane and the property owner. But once the ones that are recommended for improvement and project costs come forward, then that information is shared.
Right.
At that point in time, we come forward to the council for authorization for those project costs and
So
those
who
items.
has final say?
The council.
Okay. Okay. So Sustain Dane makes their recommendations, we approve them, or not, correct? Is that the process?
So Housing Advisory Committee is advisory to CETA and to Plan Commission and Council. So they look to you, that's why we put this group together of experts to be able to answer questions from the council that are technical. So, but CETA is really the housing authority, so that when the actual dollars are being expended, it'll go to CETA.
For the vote, okay.
But we've kept you guys in the know of everything that has happened, so it's not like we're gonna exclude you, but you don't have any authority per se. to make any action items. What you guys will do is just write, like, your things will be reported out at CETA. These are the recommendations that the Housing Advisory Committee prioritized. We'll break it down by HAC, CETA, and then the council, but we'll share that information at CETA. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, how much was allocated in the 2024 budget for this?
So 390,000, but 80,000 is what is out there right now, and that's for project management. So that's Sustained Aim doing the actual
Right. Okay.
intake, and whatnot. And then there's 310. And we did put some money in the 2025 budget as well.
So did that come from the Affordable Housing Fund? Where did that money come from?
Yeah, from the TIF dollars.
Okay, yeah, that's right, it did, okay.
So we've requested another 110,000 in the 2025 budget to kind of take us up to $500,000 for this program.
Okay.
But we'll see where that goes as well. I mean, we were just extremely pleased with the response that we got to this program, and as a collective group. So Jenny, one of the first things that we did as a group is we went through the housing plan, and each person at the table had the opportunity to share their priorities. And the number one consensus and priority was looking at our older multifamily NOAA properties. So that's where we started with our focus. And then I think one of the other priorities was home ownership. So thus we looked at engaging with H&A about the rent-to-own endowment program. So that's how that one came. And then third is our, workforce housing. Did I say the right term?
Yep,
Yeah.
we shifted from using affordable to workforce housing.
Because everybody has a different idea of what affordable is. And that's our third kind of scope that we've been working on.
And for that program to help with the definition, it's 60% of Dane County median income is the percentage that we're looking at. So that way it's not open to interpretation as far as
It's very
everybody's
defined.
lens of affordability.
Yeah.
And we're really excited about that program because we feel like it takes the stereotype away from a workforce or affordable housing project.
Stigma.
Because you will never know if your neighbor's at the 30% or if they're at the market rate. And that was one of our goals to, we don't want to have any NIMBYism, and we've seen that happen before, so.
Yeah.
So just a little background on how we got to where we're at today.
Okay. Any more comments with regard to the Efficiency Navigator? Everybody's got their responses in?
Not me, my printer ran out of ink.
Yeah, do you want me to print it? Because I can send it to you by email.
Or you can do whatever, if you don't want to print it, just send it, you can just scan what you think or you can just say, like Dan just said, question 1, I picked this, question 2, yeah.
Okay.
Just so we have a way to tally it.
Send it to you?
Both of us, you can.
Okay.
Very cool.
I will also
I don't have
remind,
your email, but I might, it's probably in the list, but.
we have council tomorrow, so I'll remind the council to.
And then if you could do me a favor too, we only want one response from each council person. So if somebody's on CETA, they should only respond one time because we really truly don't want it skewed at all.
Yep.
So,
Makes sense.
So I'm only gonna do one.
yep, you'll only do one, Jay will only do one, Joe will only do one,
Makes sense.
and Gabriella.
All right, any more comments or questions with regard to the Efficiency Navigator? We're good? Okay. Item number 8 is housing discussion, the Dane County Regional Housing Strategy Plan.
So I think we had a pretty big presentation. I don't know, Brian, if you had a chance to look at, but I'm sure you're in the know of what's going on with Dane County.
She did the same presentation to us at Governmental Affairs for Builders.
Okay. So we thought it would probably be a good opportunity to just kind of follow up and get your feedback on what you heard and if there's things we should look at or.
Does anybody want to start the discussion? I'll go first. I have a couple things that it's a very large document that needs to be kind of parceled out and digested. I haven't done that yet, but I have looked through it and I've listened to Olivia's presentation. I just had a couple of comments. One is with regard to relevancy. This is a regional analysis of housing needs. How do we distill all this information and make it apply to our unique municipality? I think that's kind of the crux of the matter, right? It does, this is great data, but how much of this is applicable to us? And what should we glean from this? And how do we make this beneficial for Fitchburg? The one thing I was just kind of struck by some of the data that was in here. One was the age cohort for Dane County and how it's changed for certain age groups as compared to the state. Like the 15 to 24-year-olds, there was an increase of like 23% for Fitchburg, whereas it was 5% for the entire state. So that's a huge increase as compared to the state. And I wondered, so what do we know about Fitchburg as it relates to who's in Fitchburg? Do we have these 15 to 24-year-olds because of EPIC? Do we have that influx of that age group? Also, what was, I think, a significant change was the 55 to 75-year-olds. That's a big group too. So how do we meet, because I think knowing our population group, we can then structure our housing initiatives to those particular needs that we have. I think this is great data to look at. The question is, how do we apply it to us? So that was one of my comments that I had. One of the things that Olivia had talked about was putting together a one-pager key strategies for cities and villages. And in here, she has, or the plan has, implementation, and there's 17 strategies, some of which we've already implemented. We're already working on. And some of them I think are a stretch for us, but some are within our reach. So I think we have to look at those and see what is applicable, again, given our unique population base. One of the things I was thinking about in here that isn't really mentioned as a strategy is either creating or embracing non-standard housing types. And so I was thinking about that and just in relationship to a few things. ADUs, accessory dwelling units. We still not have amended our zoning code with regard to those. It is permissible of right. What's the language in the code for smart code? It's of right.
By right.
By right.
Yeah.
So you can do it, but in the Fitchburg code is very antiquated and it's very restrictive. And we have made this suggestion to City Council to amend it quite a while ago, and at the Committee of the Whole, it was just dropped. So again, that's one thing we should look at, one of those tools in our toolbox, to look at different housing types that we can embrace. Another one that I thought of was workforce housing, communal housing. So Gorman & Company has done some workforce housing in ski towns because there's a drastic need for housing in ski towns. And it's a non-traditional housing type where you have, I think this one's in Keystone, communal kitchen, and then you have bedrooms. And that.
So it's almost like a dorm?
Yeah, and it works for the lift operators, whoever, and so that satisfied a need. And in that instance, I think, I don't know if we bought the land or the town of Keystone donated the land, but anyway, it's a non-traditional housing type. So I think that, again, looking at affordability, can we embrace some of these? And the third one that I thought was, again, another one that I've experienced in the town of Vail. They did deed-restricted owner-occupied townhomes. I don't remember if the town of Vail owned the land or they bought the land and donated it, but they built townhomes. They were deed-restricted in that the owners, there was a lottery that was
initiated for people to get the opportunity to buy the townhomes. That's how bad housing is in there. And so people participate in the lottery, and if you got the ticket, you could purchase one of these townhomes. Now, you were restricted in that you could not realize the appreciation on the townhome. So again, you know, costs were diminished because land was donated or the city bought the land, fees were excused, and they were sold at slightly above cost or cost. I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look at the news articles. This happened probably about 10 years ago. So again, a non-traditional type of housing situation, but again, trying to keep those costs down. So, and I know that similarly, I think Gorman Company is looking at some land in Madison to build townhomes on. I think they're trying to flesh out whether it's gonna be a 2 or 3 bedroom, but again, trying to keep those costs down to about $300,000 a unit, if they can. So
Is that
again,
the project you were telling me about on AmFam's old headquarters?
So we'll see. I haven't talked to Gary about it for a while, but I'd like to, you know, he said they'd be willing to come and give a presentation once they get some of the numbers down and figure out what they're gonna use for housing type and then what the costs are gonna be. They're hoping, you know, one of the thoughts was 2 bedroom, 1 car garage. But we live in Wisconsin. It's hard to be a 1 car garage, right? But again, I'll have to see where the numbers come in. I think in a perfect world, a 3 bedroom, 2 car garage would be a better option, especially with so many people working from home and families. So anyway, so that was something that I didn't see in here that I was wondering if there was some conversation about non-standard housing types. And then one of the things, the graph wasn't in here, but it was in Lydia's presentation about annual housing production. And I think this is, I didn't see this in there, and maybe it is, and I totally missed it because there's so many pages. But the annual housing production goal is 495 units per year for Fitchburg, which seems to be a significant number. 5-year average is 360, so that's 134 more units a year. I was wondering where they came up with that number, how that math came about. So those were my comments, basically, doing a cursory review of this. Anybody else have any comments with regard to the plan or?
And I do have the kind of the executive summary with the strategic action items, and then it goes a little further if anybody has questions or references to that.
Mike, maybe we should send that out.
The summary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it not in the
That was in the bigger document in the back.
the 107-page
Yeah,
one?
but then there's this kind of cliff note
Oh, okay.
to that they handed out when they had the lunch
Yeah.
meeting there.
Well, I've got some comments. Olivia presented she presented here back in last time we met, May. And then she also presented at committee of the whole, so we had a discussion with the council to a certain extent. A couple of things. One of the things I think would be great for this committee to do would be very much what Mallory mentioned, would be to kind of take a look at those action items and figure out what is Fitchburg's role specifically. Olivia let me know that the county is working on a checklist for cities and villages with the action items to help us, I guess, to help communities prioritize. So I think that's coming in the near future.
I think she mentioned that in the last meeting.
Yeah, so I think that's currently under, and I know they're also hiring, I believe they're also hiring a staff person. They did hire somebody, okay, to help with like zoning updates and really provide a resource for communities, so that's great. So there'll be a lot more county resources coming. But I'm just gonna list, this is in no particular order, but this is the list that kind of came up in that council discussion. And I guess the overarching number one thing that I think this committee should be focused on this year is to help give advice to council about how to spend the rest of the affordable housing funds. That $8 million of affordable housing money we have, I think we need to start putting it out in the community, in my opinion. So I think having this committee have some of those deeper discussions and make recommendations to the council, I think would be a really great role for this, a really great focus thing for this committee to work on this year. One thing that I think is important overall increasing our use of TIF to create affordable housing or incentivize affordable housing. I think advancing zoning reforms, updating our local zoning code. I know the plan department wants to do that, but Olivia talked a lot about how obviously that's a huge undertaking, but sometimes you can just do small updates in the short term to kind of improve things. And then maybe even an update of probably an update of our housing plan as well, and maybe even the housing chapter of the comp plan. So a lot of updates there. Apparently WIDA has a lot of money that can available for housing that cannot be accessed unless the zoning code and the housing section of the comp plan have been updated within the last 5 years. So
yeah, I gave that checklist for WIDA to this group, 4 or 5 meetings ago, I think. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
We actually went through it at the last
Yeah.
housing advisory meeting, the checklist from the Builders Association.
Yeah.
Housing ready? Yep.
Yeah. One of the things I mentioned was developing or expanding renter assistance programs, because we have about 50, I think about 50% of this people in the city are in apartments. Now, some of those are probably condos owned, but we have a significant number of renters in the community. I'm sure we also have home renters as well. There's discussion about increasing funding for nonprofits that are working in the area, like Project Home, like maybe even the Madison Community, Land Trust, Habitat, all sorts of different ones that are options. Create financial incentives for developers to build units in partnership with nonprofits. Similar to TIF financing, but not quite the same. Home buyer training, having some programming there. Putting out RFPs for projects. So if we want some more affordable housing in a particular area, a particular style of home, putting out RFPs. Olivia mentioned that there is a emerging developer program in Wisconsin that you can leverage, send out those RFPs, and there's a lot of people that are willing to do something that the city wants to do. She also talked about non-traditional housing, so co-housing, cooperative housing, like Troy Gardens and Madison, maybe creating something like that would be a possibility, or just generally small format housing. Modular housing is something we talked about a little bit. I don't know what role the city would have in that, but it is permitted by right in Wisconsin. It obviously reduces building costs, so that's something that is an option. And then the other thing we talked about a little bit was a statement to the federal government, the letter about condo financing.
I don't know if that's really the role of local government. I feel like that needs to be more at the federal level. You know, with our elected officials really need to be the ones to take the lead.
Oh, absolutely, but I thought that, if I'm not mistaken, I thought there was a letter.
There was, we saw it, and we kind of talked a little bit about that amongst us.
It doesn't seem like a priority from you.
I don't know, I just not probably at our level. We feel like it should either be at the state level or the feds, because I guess if they send something out, it'd be like, oh, really? Yeah, this community's trying to tell us what to do, kind of thing. We saw the Middleton letter, wasn't it?
Correct.
Yeah. We kind of talked about that. And, we can't lobby.
Okay, so sending out the letter was not, I guess I don't know, I haven't read it, I didn't even look into it really.
We haven't talked about it with administration yet, but it's probably something that should flow through Dane County cities and villages.
Okay.
Yeah, probably a higher is what we were kind of internally, the three of us kind of talking about when we saw it.
To the lobbying arm of the
Yeah.
cities and villages. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Oh yeah, and then the last thing I didn't mention was down payment assistance. And I'm not saying that we have to do any of these things, I'm just talking about these are all the ideas that came up that I think have value in discussion and have potential for utilizing the affordable housing money, but then also the money we have going forward through.
And what's the
through our
low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, what is the priority? What are we? Because there's a million things that we could do. So how do we? And I think there has been a little bit of there's so many options that we haven't taken action. We've had this money for a while.
Analysis paralysis.
Yeah, and I think the Sustained Aid is a great efficiency navigator program, putting money into that and going all proportion. That is amazing. But I think we need to be, in my opinion, we need to be pushing some of that money out as soon as possible. And it is challenging to pick.
Well, I think when you see our committee of the whole presentation, I think you'll it's gonna be a learning process for the council.
Yeah.
Because this committee has worked very hard.
And
We've vetted,
We already talked about.
yeah, we've vetted all
Getting
these.
voters to see that and it goes nowhere or whatever.
Yeah, we've vetted a lot of these programs, but
It's not making its way to council.
no, it's, once again, this group read the housing, they read the housing plan. And we set our priorities based upon what we felt that this community needed. And it was truly a consensus. I mean, there was, and I can, because I went back through the minutes to look at every single thing. And we felt like right now, these are the three areas that we want to focus. The rent-to-own, the efficiency navigator, and the affordable units. And we're looking at TIF in addition to, that's part of the affordable unit conversation.
I think even with the rent-to-own, the council authorized the first phase of that unanimously, and that was 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, I know, I don't know.
And we were asked to go back and do more due diligence. And as Joyce and Reno point out, when the presentation is at the committee of the whole meeting, I think you'll be surprised at how much time and effort was done with due diligence over the last 2.5 years, meeting with all kinds of different partners that are out there as we vetted that program. And we're meeting internally next week, Tuesday, with administration, finance, and legal that raised questions and or concerns regarding the business model, and then we'll be bringing that forward to the council at the committee of the whole meeting in September.
Right.
Because that's one that we were ready to go, and then administration asked us to step back on it and do more due diligence. And so we want to get those. That's why we're excited that the Efficiency Navigator program is launched. We'd like to see and hopefully get support to look at the rent-to-own and look to do a pilot program. And then we're working with I should say one right now, but we might ask a second one on the workforce within market rate. We've done some initial analysis with Ellers. Right now, it's not kind of at the level that it's, let's say, incentive enough for a private sector developer to say, okay, we want to be on board for it. So we've asked them to give us a counter proposal that we could work with Ellers to evaluate and see if we've got kind of a meeting of the minds or we can close that gap. But that would be another one that we'd like to do. I think our focus has been on, because once we start to utilize these dollars, like if we do the rent-to-own, that's $4 million out of the 9.5 that we have. And you guys will learn about that at the committee of the whole meeting as far as the investment that it'll take. So those dollars will go out the door quickly as we start to launch other programs. So one thing we've been focused on is how do we create either a sustainable program, which the rent-to-own does that. Probably 90% of the dollars would come back based on the program model, the way they've structured it. But we've also looked at how can we maybe leverage other resources out there, or maybe not duplicate programs that are already out there being done by other folks. So we just had a meeting with Dane County and found out they've got a down payment assistance program that's underutilized there. So maybe our role is marketing, promoting, and educating people that resource is available and out there. For people on the home buyer education, we were just chatting today about, there's so many good organizations out there that are already doing that. We don't necessarily have to replicate that, but how do we promote, market, and collaborate, with those entities? So what's our role there to kind of be effective without, kind of duplicating really good efforts that are already out there?
Or bringing it to Fitchburg specifically.
Yeah.
Bringing it inside.
The Urban League does one monthly home buyer session.
And to kind of piggyback off of what Mike said, I think right now we're looking at the back end, finding out how we can market these items out there. Just making sure that like the social media piece and various other ways to roll out this information, so.
And then we do think, I don't think it's, I think it's public knowledge that there might be some dollars from Dane County allocated to Habitat for Humanity to look at communities to collaborate with on projects. So that's something that Lorraine's already been in contact with Hillary, right, at Habitat to say, hey, we're interested and we would, love to be able to partner with them and identify potential areas in Fitchburg that might be another partnership with them, just like we did in Renaissance on the Park. Or maybe it's not just their traditional single-family model, maybe it's also a multifamily model that they have as well. So we've already opened the lines of communication on that with Habitat.
And some of the things you mentioned, like the land trust, so we've done a ton of investigating into that. And one of the things that we've learned from, talking to different groups, it doesn't help build wealth. And that's a really important thing when you're looking at generational wealth. You want to have, that be part of the overall plan for these dollars. So maybe the council doesn't think we're pushing things out the door fast enough, but Mike, I guess one thing you'll learn about all of us, we're very, very conservative, I would say.
Strategic.
We're very strategic, and we're very much thought-provoking, because we've talked to, even Habitat said, land trust model, you don't build that wealth. We talked to Commonwealth. He said, land trust models, you don't build the wealth. Our banks, we talked to, and they told us it's really difficult to finance that model. So we're like, okay, we've investigated it, but at this time, it's gonna go on the back burner because we have other ways to capitalize on the ideas that we have. And bringing product to the market. That's one of the things that when we talked to Commonwealth, he was very, he said, you need to add more product to the market, more inventory. So, we've done so much work, and sometimes it's a little frustrating to hear that, because I'm very much like, once the dollars are gone, we do not have any way to replenish. It's not coming from the general fund. We haven't asked for any money from the general fund, and we've been really very strategic about how this whole thing is going to work.
So I think the committee of the whole presentation will be really helpful then. And I 100% believe you guys have been doing a ton on housing.
We have.
It's not filtered to council. I guess that's what the disconnect is it just has not filtered to council. So the committee of the whole will be a nice opportunity to talk about that. But I guess I would encourage you to, if something has been vetted and then your recommendation is to not include it, I hope, can we still talk about it at committee of the whole? Because I think I would prefer to have that public conversation about why something has been vetted and have a discussion about it rather than have it be vetted and dismissed on a staff level and never have public discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're fine with sharing all that information because it's all part of the presentation.
Right.
But we've done like research on what's all out there for programs and why would we want to recreate the wheel if there's already something out there that our residents can capitalize on. Dane County has programs, WIDA has programs. So that's what we want to be able to put our money in a creative way where we know we're going to get dollars back or partner with somebody.
Yeah, but that's also what, I mean, maybe there's also a step back that we need to do and talk about what is the mission that we're trying to do with this affordable housing money. Like, what are we trying to do with the money? Because you talk about, I work for Habitat, so I know of the model quite well. And so wealth generation is a big part of the model.
Right.
Habitat builds affordable homes, but Habitat builds affordable homes to sell into families so that they can generate wealth through the owning of that home.
Right.
So it's actually less about affordable housing and it's more about building wealth for the families. So that's the
business model to
exactly. Yeah. But I am not convinced that the best. So I'm not going to say that it's not. I'm just saying that I'm going to put it out there that maybe wealth generation is not, building wealth is not the best use of these affordable housing dollars. Because it's not the same as creating affordability. It is really valuable and it's something that needs to be done. But is that what we should be doing with the housing money? Or should we be putting it into programs that are creating affordability for families on an individual basis? which would, if that is the focus and not so much the wealth generation, then a land trust could be on the
I
table.
never said that was our only focus.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Right, I never said that.
Well, I guess my impression was the community land trust was dismissed because of the lack of wealth building. I guess that was what I heard from your statement.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
Especially on land trusts, having been an affordable housing developer in the greater Seattle area, more land, more money, more problems. Land trusts just are so awkward and difficult to work with. You know, you tie up affordable housing, so when you buy it and you've got a 15-year commitment for the tax credit lifespan, in Washington State, you have a 40-year commitment from the county, a 50-year commitment that land has to be spent on affordable housing. So you can, sell to an affordable housing developer, but whatever you put on there is entitled to be affordable housing with the constraints that are put into the contract that this project was awarded. So you can tie up the apartments that way. It's nice to have some kind of replenishment fund, like we talked about with the parks here. It's nice to build them. And, the tax credit investors, which are the big gorillas in the room, will, go for the new projects, but they aren't really happy about rehab projects. They're not really happy about any kind of maintenance fund. So those are always a challenge. And a land trust is going to tie you with a maintenance fund and rehab more than anything else. And the banks don't want to deal with the land trusts. They really don't. So you have a hard time finding your permanent lender. So they're a wonderful idea. I think they work great for Ducks Unlimited and for the Sierra Club, that land is entrusted for nature conservancy, but for affordable housing, they're just a challenge. And it's hard enough to do that job, let alone to add the challenge of a land trust on top of it. So that's my 2 cents on land trusts. I think if you and the other city councils in this area, Madison has its own housing fund, right? And when I lived out in the King County, Seattle had a housing fund, which was another set of funds that came out of the general budget, right? That wasn't from a TIF project, it wasn't from some other public source, that they set aside for housing. Madison's big enough to have a big enough fund to have an impact and to fund a project or 2 or 3. The smaller communities not. So they created a regional coalition of everyone putting in a certain percentage of their annual budget to affordable housing. And they created this regional coalition fund to help build affordable housing. So it may not be in your community that there's awarded funds in this funding round, but it might be, your neighbors. And so you could have enough money to have an impact and do something. So that's another idea if the city council is interested in that I don't believe is in the Dane County one, because they're going from a county-wide perspective, not from the perspective of the various communities that have needs and perspectives that they are wanting to fill.
What is that called?
It was called a Regional Coalition for Housing. And, they, of course, had to come up with someone to run it and fund it and their own criteria. And so it's like when we would do that and we would get 2% of our money from the Regional Coalition for Housing. I mean, they filled the little gaps, but they always had the most stringent hoops we had to jump through. It's like, it initially has to be filled with residents from our community, which is a challenge when you're leasing to people that are income restricted, right? It's like, you're income restricted and you have to meet these guidelines, but you also have to be living in, say, Fitchburg or Monona it just adds hoops. So I believe that the communities at the time that was developed before I started in it, were looking to meet the needs of their various councils that wanted to do that. And, that was basically what they did. The King County also put together a pre-fund, right? So that you could get the money together to do one of the things with affordable housing and in greater Seattle area, it's all not-for-profits. I wouldn't say all, but like 95% not-for-profits. So coming up with the money to do the initial analysis of the market research, what is this gonna work out at? Will it pencil? What is the architect's funds for it? What are your legal fees on that? There was, I'm trying to remember the name of it and blanking, there were funds that you could get that were bought off or just excused at the time your project was awarded funds, that you could present this application and say, okay, now we have the money to hire the architect, to hire the marketing firm to see what the rents would be in this area, what it's gonna support, and do some of that preliminary work, which these guys are doing right now, all that vetting work and hiring, and the city is paying for that because that rent-to-own project here is the kind of project that you would do as an affordable housing developer. It's a different model with a rent-to-own than what I did, which was apartment buildings, but it is a model, and Habitat has another model, and I know Habitat has done a few apartments, but it's not their favorite model, so. But I mean, that's just my 2 cents on that. If your focus is on getting the city to do that, then making some touches or reaching out to some of the other cities about putting together a group of funds so you have more money without it taking such a dink out of everyone's budget, or just put in repeating funds that you constantly are funding. And as a project comes back and they pay back that fund, then you have more money to help fund the next project. So those are just kind of like finance people can give you better details on that than I could. I just asked for the money.
My little 2 cents, I guess, is that the housing stability piece, right? That home ownership is important, right? It's especially coming from the education sector and real estate. We want families to stay in housing. We know that rents constantly increase, and then that, prices them out of their house, and then they have to keep looking. But if
It's expensive to move.
Yes,
Yeah.
but we know that if they're in a mortgage, then their payments stay the same. So we want to keep families in their house, So looking for more home ownership I think is the key to keep housing stability.
I think the crisis that we ended up with today, there's so many moving pieces. Like, I get a little frustrated because I know the backstory, like Verona, I'm just gonna use them for an example, and I've talked to our new deputy administrator about that. They, for several years, had a moratorium on the number of apartment units they were gonna build. 100, that was it. For several years, when Epic was bringing in 1,500 per class. So when you look at that, Gabriella, that's my equilibrium, and I feel like we have done a really good job of bringing supply to the market. And we hear it all the time about all the apartments, I said to Mike, how many affordable units are going out in Maple Bluff? How many affordable units are going out in Shorewood Hills? How many affordable units are going out in Wanakee? Because I know all these communities, and I think that we have to look at kind of the county's role in what telling us to do should be what we do benefits the county's mission, but I don't believe, unless they're gonna give us a pot of money, that they should be telling us what we need to do. I think our housing plan should be what we focus on, and if we complement their goals, that's great. But that's just my opinion, and until, I just feel like there's been this trickle down that all these things have come and it's all pointing at the community, and we have such a small role in what happens that I'm tired of getting blamed. We're trying to do really good things here, and I don't appreciate, and I've told Olivia this too, that, it's not fair. It's not fair that we've done a really good job and other communities haven't, but we're still penalized, if that makes sense. Because we've gone to try and get CDBG dollars in the past, and we have to compete. So we're competing with the small communities that have a much less budget or you know, they don't have TIF, so they can't capitalize the housing fund, so they get moved up the priorities. That's where there's like a bigger picture, and I guess I'm looking at this from the bigger picture than kind of the here and now, because Dane County did this analysis. Does that make sense? We've been further ahead. I mean, 2009 is when Mike and I put in our
presentation on the 27th.
Yeah, 2009 was the first time Mike and I put money in the budget to work on housing, and we got it turned down. So if I seem like I'm coming at you, I kind of am, because we have done a lot, and it seems like nobody knows, and then they say we're not doing enough, and it, you know, there's been two of us till we got this amazing person to complete our team, and so I'm a little bit, you know, I'm a little pushbacky about housing.
So I'm not exactly sure why my comments were perceived as a critique, because it was absolutely was not. I think you guys have been doing a fantastic job in a lot of ways, and I look forward to the discussion. My list of things was just the things that I have learned about through presentations that I want to have discussion about at some level.
Sure.
And I feel like it made it seem like I'm like a super pro proponent of land trusts. All I was saying was that I wanted to discuss it, like have an open discussion about it, because I think if the question comes up about why not this, I think we should have a discussion on the record that's like, this is why we ruled that out. And the council, if the council is not part of that at some level, even if it's just being informed, then the council, that question will continue to arise.
Right.
So it's like these things have to be discussed and addressed at some
with
level.
education, it needs to be, because I didn't know all of that stuff either.
Oh,
so
yeah, you'll find it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what I said was not a critique at all, and I look forward to the discussion, and I think the council, what's great about this council, well, not only do we have a new housing specialist, but we have a council that is very interested in housing. Every single person on that council talks about how housing is a priority. So we are like in a moment in time when the regional discussion is happening, the council is prepared to do it, we have a housing committee, we have a new staff member that's focused on it. Like, it's just like we are in a moment in time where we can really make something happen in the next, 6 to 12 months, and it's just exciting. So I hope nothing I said was intended as a critique at all.
I am a little touchy about it. I will admit it, because I do know all the background that we've done, and it's with 2 people.
Yeah, it's incredible.
With 2 people. I mean, these guys know because we've talked about different things that we've done, but
and with the land trust, we're actually meeting with them on Thursday of this week with the Madison Area Community Land Trust group, just to, again, open the lines of communication, learn more, educate ourselves, and everything as we look at things. I think the thing that we've discussed internally, and even with Lorene being on board now, is being strategic and focused, because we could be all over the map with 10 different programs here, and how do we've got 3 right now that we need to finish vetting, there before we kind of divert and scatter our attention, all over the map on a lot of different programs. We really need to get through those 3. Not to say we can't do other things simultaneously, but like I said, we've been waiting 2.5 years on this rent-to-own program to get to a decision point. Are we a go, or are we pivoting to something else there? And we really want to move that forward. But the one thing I will emphasize that we really would like this committee's help for, none of us have a checkbook big enough to address the affordability issue until we get the inventory out there with multifamily and get that back into equilibrium, and single family. We need lots and inventory, here. For 10 years after 2008 and the housing bust, we sat with less than 50 single family housing starts in this community for 10 years. And it wasn't that there wasn't demand out here, it was just that we weren't able to get through the neighborhood and subdivision kind of process to get new lots and subdivisions entitled. We're struggling right now with the 2 neighborhood plans that our planning colleagues are working on to get through the process there. And we're getting some pushback from our existing residents and saying, well, tell folks to go elsewhere, for housing, exact comments or direct comments in a public setting, So we need your help to kind of educate and inform the public of why we need and why it's good for everybody to increase the amount of housing availability, single family and multifamily, because we can tinker around the edges right now with affordability, but until there's some better balance and equilibrium, it's going to take a huge checkbook to do it without the market being in some kind of balance and equilibrium.
So that's,
I always said that I've been cheerleading this, Mike knows for 20 years, that our restrictive land use policies in Fitchburg, and I know there's always the balance of farmland and what people like about Fitchburg, but then the land use policies that we've been so restrictive have picked the small pockets of land that could be developed, which makes that raw land 2 to 3 times more expensive than community neighborhoods, the Veronas, the Middletons, the Stoughton's, where our raw land is just that much more expensive here just because it's a smaller source, a smaller pot to choose from, even though we are the second largest city in Dane County, which baffles me. I mean, we have an odd mindset, I think, with our planning and zoning here. And I think that restriction has caused land prices to go up. And then some of our development criteria in the zoning, it gets talked about, but I know I think planned in the budget for 2025 now.
25.
Yeah, to redo the zoning code, but like our smart code is now 24 years old, so it's not so smart anymore. And our inclusion zoning hasn't been modified in 30 plus years.
I think that's the 1980s.
Probably since our incorporation.
Right. Yeah. It hasn't been updated, so I look at, we got money and we can do these programs that kind of help the after-fact cost, but we also need to look at things that we can do as a city to reduce the upfront costs with land availability, more zoning for different types of products, not just picking one type of product, because you pick small lots, and that's the focus for the city for about 3 years. Well, you're eliminating 60-70% of the market because you're only doing small lots. There are people that want some bigger lots that might have had a small lot, but now they need a little bit more space. And I know that a lot of planners look at, they want walkable neighborhoods or walkability of neighborhoods. And the economics of that has gone away in the last 10 years with the internet society that we now live in. We can walk in a neighborhood, but the corner grocery store, the corner mom and pop, hair salon or barber or whatever, those things just don't exist anymore because of the economics of scale. You can't pay the rent that is required in the buildings that we require all the fancy facades on anymore. Those businesses ran in a corner office of a house or in a basement of a 2-story building
all
or
the
something.
commercial space that's vacant now at the bottom of the residential housing.
Well, and that's what I was going to get to is the smart code allows for first floor retail. It's prescriptive so that if you did have some first floor retail, you can do the density that you need. But then that first floor retail never gets occupied. And so on the landlord or on the owner, it's just a drag on the economics of it. So it doesn't work. That's why you're not seeing a lot of it. You're seeing some, but not a lot of it built under that code. And so I think there are things that we need to do. I just was, the sustainability, his last name's Gage, right? Ruby, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He came and did a presentation and he was talking about how, the efforts of that entity or committee, or it's not really a committee, but focus of that part of the city's focus, I don't know what the right
Because
word
we're doing the
is.
sustainability
The sustainability plan was to reduce, greenhouse gas and carbon emissions. And we really need to get that down in our land development. I'm like, well, then stop requiring sidewalks on both sides of the street because that'll reduce our carbon emissions. We'll meet a goal then, if we do that. Is it really gonna affect, is it gonna help? Yeah, I mean, when our own programs or requirements for our planning affect the cost of the lot, and are contradictory to maybe our sustainability goal, well, maybe we really should start looking at that now, if that's really gonna be something we wanna look at. I think there's many internal opportunities. And I think Chad, by having the committee, each department head meeting is actually gonna start getting some of that going, because I think some departments don't even know that another department has something that contradicts with them. Yeah. And that's something that I think really needs to get worked out in the city itself. Because that's been a problem for a long time. That you go and you meet with zoning and they say yes, and then you go and meet with the engineering department and they say, well, you gotta build the roads to these standards and not only do you have to have, you know, 2 bike or 2 sidewalks and 66-foot wide roadway, but then sometimes you gotta have a 7-foot bike path in a neighborhood. Well, okay, why do we have sidewalks if we have to have a bike path? It should be one or the other, not both. You know, or parking on one side of the street, not both. Get the streets narrowed down so that you can get more density of maybe medium-sized lots in more acreage. I mean, there's lots of ways that we gotta look at things to help pull the cost down up front, and then we can use some of the money that we get through TIF to work on the programs on the backside. We can't just attack one part of it. We gotta look at the whole system as a whole. And I think that's one thing that this committee has offered opinions and ideas, and we just need to make sure that through the report that it comes out at the committee of the whole.
You just dove right into what my big question was, is what do we have to do to attract developers to this city? You know, what are the barriers? And I guess, you know, you just answered all.
Yeah, I mean,
and how do we?
Having been doing this bad English, but doing land development, you know, with our family and stuff since the 60s, Fitchburg has one of the tougher approval processes and longer approval processes.
Well, and seemingly more expensive as well,
but
right?
It's more expensive to develop, but if you have a raw piece of land, you want to develop it in Fitchburg, you might as well plan on it being a 2 to 2.5 year process before you can actually have a lot to sell. And you can do something in Verona or Madison and have it done in 90 to 120 days. So you have holding costs.
How do we fix that? What do we do? Who do we have to?
Well, we gotta get ourselves out of the way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
As a municipality, we gotta have and that's where the zoning comes in, where if we can update the smart code so that it actually is more effective to be used, so that it's, you know, prescriptive staff approval for densities, that type of thing. And the other part of it is, and Mike kind of touched on this, is, you know, the city has to decide what's important, and the elders are gonna have to stick up to that, which might be contradictory to their constituents.
Yeah.
And that's probably the hardest part.
Right.
You know, what's good for the city in a certain area, if an elder doesn't want to stick up for what's right for the city and listens to the elders, or listens to their constituents and says, well, I'm not gonna vote for that development because my constituents don't want it, even though it's the right thing to do, it's in the plan, it's the right thing to do, and it's good for the city economically, when the elders say no, why try to develop?
Yeah.
And I
When you
think,
meet all the plan goals, I guess what I'm saying, and it still gets turned down.
We ran into that with a small project on Rimrock Road.
Yeah.
You know, where it was aligning with the neighborhood plan,
Yeah.
but because it was an infill development and there was
And then
neighborhood
Nobody
opposition.
wants it in their
In the
backyard.
end, we're getting there, but
Yeah.
how much longer has it taken, you know, to just bring that project
That was
forward?
like 18 months.
Yeah.
We worked on that one, and the last one was that, like the townhomes, for zoning for townhomes, you have to have all the townhomes facing a street. Well, if you have a square 3-acre piece and only have 500 feet of frontage, you can't really develop the back half of it unless you do a PUD. And that's it, then you're getting back into utility and zoning. So there's problems with our own zoning that slow us down or cause delays or different city approvals. And I know like the fire department, they want to make sure they have their widths to run their biggest fire truck down every street or private driveway in Fitchburg, which I understand safety, but those things add cost. And so we have to have that balancing act of, okay, does the ladder that reaches 300 feet need to drive down a street that has houses that are maximum 25 feet tall or 37 feet tall? You know, we have to kind of think about those balances.
So what's
Well,
the
and-
process for changing all of these issues? Like who's in charge?
we're working on
You
that.
know, we've made
Yeah.
some really good strides. You know, we've got a weekly development team meeting now that
Okay.
brings all the departments together, that people that are working on projects can meet with
okay.
that. So it's everybody from building inspection, planning, to engineering, to economic development,
Fire.
administration, fire, is all at the table, so it's a one-stop
All
shop.
the people that have hands in the pot in a
Yeah.
development.
So you don't have to, as a
process.
developer,
Yeah.
go and chase down all these
Right.
folks individually. And as Brian said, it's helpful for us as collective colleagues,
Right.
because if there's some contradiction, we can work that out then,
Yeah.
you know, within that discussion and working with the
Because
developer.
clearly we need to be a more developer-friendly community. And, you know, even just looking at the costs in this, Fitchburg is the highest. This sample development, we're the highest compared to Madison, Middleton, Sun Prairie, Verona, DeForest, and Wanakee. So, you know, it's more expensive and it takes longer and it's more restrictive, is what kind of the summary of that is. So, yeah, so how do we start to
just
Although with the
break
Smart
some of
Growth
those
Greater
barriers.
Madison recent analysis,
Yeah.
we were actually the most efficient
Okay.
getting people through the process, but what helped us there was Smart Code.
Yeah.
Because things were done, by administrative approval versus having to go through, multiple public hearings. Because once you rezone it to Smart Code, that's your only public hearing.
So like
With the
fast
Smart
tracks.
Code on the front end.
Okay.
Yeah, so that helped us to be
Yeah.
the most efficient. I think where we're stuck right now, and we have money to do it, it's just staff capacity to get there. We need to update our zoning code, because it really hasn't probably been updated since our incorporation.
And who's in
as a
charge of
city.
that?
That's our city planner, Deanna Schmidt, and
Okay.
they've got it in the queue, but
Okay.
right now, these neighborhood plans are taking longer
Yeah.
than, what we envisioned. She's planning to issue an RFP to start the major comp plan update process in 2025, because what happened here is in 2019, when we were doing a major comp plan update, the elected officials at that time limited the major comp plan update to only looking at the existing urban service area, except for two outliers, and that was the Edgewood parcel, and it was the parcel down that the Oregon School District acquired for a future middle school down there. So we did not do a full-blown comprehensive plan update in 2019. In this market, we needed a full-blown reevaluation with the growth and development that we've had here. So we're behind, and we're trying to catch up. Luckily, through ARPA and TID dollars for the successful TID closures, whereas some communities don't have the money to do it, we've got the money to do those things. It's just a matter of getting to staff capacity to do them. So hopefully the neighborhood plans are finished by the end of this year. Then we launch the major comp plan update process, maybe accelerate the housing element, working with Dane County with some best practices and everything there. And then we also then look forward to the future zoning code rewrite. And the other thing that is in desperate need of an update is our sign code. And we know they all need to be updated. It's just how quickly can we get to them? I even mentioned to our colleagues in administration, I said, in an ideal world, is there somebody out there in the planning consulting world that could be one firm that collectively works on your comp plan while they're also working on your zoning code? So that way they're all in sync. Kind of maybe they're going hand in hand instead of waiting to finish the comp plan before we do the zoning code, rewrite. Is there that collective group of firms that could have those running in tandem, so they're in sync.
Understanding all the moving parts.
In the end, yeah. Now on the fees, the one thing I will mention there is the outlier for us as far as I think what really pushed us to be the highest is our fee in lieu of a parkland dedication compared to our other peer communities there. But that's a community conversation, parks are a priority in our community and something that our residents indicate they would like, they desire. It's one of the reasons why we're ranked really high for our quality of life. So that's a community conversation to say.
So how hard and firm is there any way that someone could ask for that to be waived? Because, we've all listened to the Parks Department talk about how they don't have enough funds to maintain all of our parks. We can build them, but then we don't have the funds to really maintain them over the course of 20, 30, 40 years or whatever it is. Are we building too many parks? Can we get loosey-goosey on the park fees to try to get, those costs down or is this something that is just an absolute?
Joyce is gonna take that one.
I'm just asking the question.
One of the things I brought forth was we had just approved 4 different programs, there's $50–60 million available for different things. But one of the criteria is the city or municipality has got to show what they're willing to do to help get project approved. So our municipality needs to have if you come with a project that meets certain criteria for hitting WIDA, that you're going to waive the parkland fee, that you're going to reduce the water and sewer connection impact fees. What the city was willing to do in order to meet some of these criteria, it's got to get approved through council. And so those are some of the things that we need to work on is what is the city willing to do in order to meet the programs that are out there so that we can get developers to get the developer money.
Right.
for the infrastructure, for, you know, because there's money for developers for infrastructure, there's money for builders if the houses meet certain criteria for income standards, and the development sometimes goes hand in hand, and there's, you know, Main Street money that they have for WIDA too, but we don't really have much of that in Fitchburg, because that's mostly second story of retail areas and downtown neighborhoods, and we don't really have a downtown that has.
I mean, I'm all for parks, but at a certain point in time, if we don't have enough housing, we're gonna have homeless people living in our parks because they don't have any houses to live in, you know what I mean? Like, how many parks is enough,
But
you know?
when we talk about lobbying,
Yeah.
that's where we need to lobby. We need to lobby the state to change the use of those dollars. Because they only allow you to use those dollars for new parks.
Oh.
It doesn't allow you to use the dollars
See,
for
that's-
maintenance
yeah.
or.
Crazy.
Right.
So that's, to me, that's where I think we as a local, I asked Scott this in our parkland, I said, that your park and rec group should be the ones who are taking the lead on this.
See, but that's the wrong, that's what I'm saying, that's the wrong tact. Because all you're gonna do is increase the cost of housing by doing that. And that's the problem. Because you're gonna try to take and allow that money to be used for maintenance, which is only gonna raise the fee that every development unit, house, apartment is gonna have to pay. That's not gonna help affordability of housing.
Okay, Brian, then what
That's one of the things,
happened?
as a building association, we did the analysis, and that's why the law was written, so that a municipality has to do a needs analysis of what the impact is of 60 units of housing, what size park that 60 units would need. And then the money that's required to develop that park with the play equipment and a structure if needed, you know, a shelter or something, what those 60 units cost affect.
Yeah.
What is required for having the park for those 60 units, or 120 units, or 300 units, whatever it is. That's the needs analysis that each municipality has to do in order to have their impact fee set. And if you make it for operations, all you're doing is raising the costs.
But then what happens to our revenues though, too? I mean, that's one thing I have a hard time with is we're supposed to give. And remember I just mentioned the trickle down. I think this needs to be a national conversation. Because affordable housing isn't unique to Fitchburg. It's not unique to Wisconsin. It needs to be a national conversation with everybody at the table. You know, like I said, I feel like the realtors need to also be saying, okay, if I'm selling this piece of land for affordable housing, my commission is less. I mean, I feel like everybody that's involved in the process needs to step up, otherwise we're never gonna fix the problem. But that's just my opinion. What it's worth is, you know, and I say it all the time. Everybody needs to step up to the table because we can't expect one entity to fix the problem. And I don't think, like Andy Potts said, you know, the fees that we collect on the what percentages is that of the overall? I get it's really the infrastructure costs and those charges that really add a lot to the overall cost of the house versus, you know, our permitting fees or whatnot. But do you know what the percentage of the actual local fees, like for a building permit, what that is of the overall cost of a house? Is it like 1% or is it?
Well, it's higher than that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you count everything from raw land through a finished house, it's 32% of a house that goes towards it. There's national studies and
Fees, permitting, and
there's-
inspections, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so it's everything that housing has to go through, from raw land all the way through the processes.
So that's fees and staff time and everything?
Fees, staff time, permit requirements, zoning requirements, everything that's required to get to a finished product, adds about 32% to the cost of a house. Yeah, it's crazy. And I'm on the national board, and as you know, that's why I missed the last meeting, because I was in DC lobbying for housing, and 10 points that we want to try to get across to get affordability down. Because there are things nationally, there are things statewide, there are things locally, and so we just got to attack what we can attack at the different levels.
At this committee level, specifically for park fees,
Yeah.
this committee has recommended that we review that park structure. And in the park and open space plan, that is the recommendation in there. kind of coming from this
That is
group.
in there, yeah.
Yeah,
To
so we
review.
did carry that forward, and one of the things that we discussed here just internally with staff is there kind of a right sizing of, maybe we look to
How many
reduce,
parks do we need?
maybe we look to reduce our fee a
Per
little in park
capita.
dedication,
Yeah.
but maybe we increase a certain amount our park improvement fees.
Yeah.
Maybe not an equal for equal amount, but to your point of, we're chasing our tail trying to maintain our parks
Yeah.
there, so maybe we need to right size a little bit
Right, yeah.
what our land
Just
dedication or
ask
fee
the
in lieu of,
question,
there, or
maybe
at least have that
yeah,
conversation with
right,
the community
yeah.
and see what their priorities are.
Yeah,
And that's why a lot of the impact fees, the way they're structured and developed is what the impact is for the initial construction. The ongoing maintenance, care and everything should be burdened by the whole tax base. That way everybody is sharing in the cost of maintaining, because
Yeah.
anybody can use the park. It's not just the people that
Yeah.
might live in that area. And we have regional parks that, that's kind of the thought process of an impact fee is the impact that a development might have for that immediate area, not for ongoing maintenance.
yeah.
Although if we were gonna use park fees for anything, I understand your argument about not using for maintenance. It would be nice for it to be able to be rebuild community assets, like Kids Crossing,
Right.
or like the McKee Farms tennis
Or
courts.
resurfacing.
Like those type of things where it's a big community asset that
Yeah.
bringing more people into the community would be bringing more users to it.
Right.
I completely agree that it can't be used for maintenance
What
costs
good
because
is
that
all
has to
of
be
our
borne by
new
the
parks,
operating budget.
the ones we already have are falling apart,
But yeah, and that doesn't matter
Yeah.
because that's a state
Yeah.
level
It's a
issue
state
anyway.
statute.
But
Okay,
I think it'd be very difficult to get that law changed because it affects more than just parks. I
okay,
mean, it's
yeah,
impacts go to construction. It's water, sewer, parks, could be stoplights, it could be whatever that affect a road half mile down the way that you gotta contribute to. There's lots of things that impact fees
yeah,
that you don't really hear about, but when you fill out a permit, you get a report back of what the permit fees for, impact fees are for a whole municipality. It's not just one, it's
yeah.
typically 6 or 8.
But maybe a levy limit, relaxing levy limits would be, something to give communities more flexibility and more.
Well, and they're adjusting the formula that the levy limit is based off of that. Yeah, it's based off new growth plus a percentage, rather than just new growth. And, that kind of thing. Right.
See? We're never gonna solve it.
But I mean, I think that your point about flexibility, like one of my favorite quotes is like, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Like there's all these great ideas and it's like in a perfect world, you would have a beautiful park for every neighborhood and you'd have like all these perfect infrastructure, but like we need housing. So what can we compromise on
Something's
to
gotta
make
give.
things move
Yeah.
and make the economics work?
Yeah.
Like we need housing.
Right.
Like it just,
Well,
Yeah,
and the sad thing too is I think we need to recognize that farming's changed too.
Right.
And the farming of the past and the farming of today is so different. And what we think should be preserved as farmland, the farmers, that's their investment, that's their retirement. They're not selling it for a new farmer to come in and take I'll use the O'Briens and
They put a solar farm on it.
yeah.
My
So-
grandfather used to say there's always a current and best use for land, and it might not always be farming.
Right.
And he was a farmer.
So one of the interesting things about that is you talk about our finite resource of developed land and pockets in Fitchburg. So we have, it occurred to me one day, I have 4 solar farms within probably 3 miles of our house.
We're gonna have 4 more.
And the issue is,
They're gonna basically build a belt across the south side of Fitchburg here in
so,
about.
they've contacted us, right? And so what's interesting and discouraging at the same time is that landowners, farmers who have this land for their investment and their retirement can contract with these solar developers without notifying the municipality. And even MG&E doesn't have to know about it. So they enter into these contracts and then they come to the city and say, oh, by the way, we're gonna take 300 acres and we're gonna put a solar farm here. So it's 300 acres of developable land that we were planning for tax to put a school on and more housing. And so,
Once it's approved by the PSC, the municipalities don't have any say in it.
it has to be, the only criteria is that if it impinges on the public health and safety, which is a pretty high bar, and how do you prove that?
Yeah.
And so, what used to be our old family farm is now, instead of a 300 acre, it's a 150 acre solar farm right across Fish Hatchery Road. And so, there was legislation proposed that would allow municipalities to have the final say on solar development and where it would go. And that bill never made it anywhere. But I think Senator Markline proposed that. So when you talk about lobbying, that's something that could be done and give municipalities more control over developable land for housing that's being used for solar. I have nothing against green energy, however, I do have a problem with it going in places where it would be beneficial, right on the edge of our urban service line. This just happened to be near whatever you call that thing that transports the energy.
Yeah.
Whatever the
Transformer?
transformer, yeah, that big thing that sits over there.
But,
Because when the mayor was notified of this, she's like, you can't do that. I'm planning this. We're anticipating growth, we're anticipating housing. So luckily, it was reduced by half, but that didn't necessarily have to be. But that's power taken out of the municipalities and put in this, somewhere else, which it shouldn't be, because we should be able to control the use of our land within our municipalities. So, and there's more developed, proposed. I didn't know that there were or weren't.
All of our farm property owners get letters constantly.
Well, I get them all the time.
Yeah.
But
basically from the O'Brien Field straight across almost Irish Lane,
yeah,
the Mant land, they've been asked.
that is the Mant farm
Right,
that's going through, yeah.
right,
That's
yeah.
the old Gorman farm.
And then now some of the Fades have been asked.
Over here, right here on Irish.
Yeah, so south of what Viridian's doing right now, they've been asked. So it could create a belt where Fitchburg can't grow if we don't get out of our own way and get our things improved and get.
Would updating the comp plan and creating like some guidance on the future urban development area, would that can't happen? That's not.
Well,
It's not gonna
stop that.
because we don't have authority.
Again, this
Okay.
it's by statute, right?
Yeah.
And so some of the local jurisdictions have said, we don't want our quote prime farmland developed into solar arrays.
So we can't call dibs on it.
But it doesn't have any legal effect.
Yeah, and I've seen that come through, and it's like the solar farm needs approval plan, and it's like, well, we can't really say no. Like, we're technically approving it, but also we can't.
Landscaping around the front of it, and that's it.
Yeah.
We did quietly exert some influence working with MG&E with the one that is by Muchler and north of Wayland, because that was going to go on the west side of Muchler too. And we already were in conversations with the Verona School District about acquiring, the Lacey Farm for a future high school here. And so we went to MG&E and said, you got to help us here, and they were very helpful in trying to redirect it and keep things on the east side of Muchler. So it still keeps the west side open, and hopefully then when we look to do the major comp plan update starting in 2025, because in the Verona School District, we're out of lots. Right now with Stoner Prairie and with Crescent Crossing built out, we're out of lots, and we probably won't see lots there, new lots, for 3 to 5 years. Unless Payne and Dolan, with the property that they have in the existing urban service area that they have a CDP on, comes forward with something. But that's where we're at in the Verona School District there, which is a real concern.
Yeah.
And that's why with the goals that Regional Housing Strategies has for us with 495, 360 average, I don't even think we're gonna meet that, let alone get up to 495. That's what, to my earlier comment, we all need to focus on how do we bring more inventory and make it available, because we're not even gonna reach the 360 threshold if we don't start getting something else open up here. The other challenge we have, much to our frustration sometimes, is the land that we have in the existing urban service area, that's vacant land, sometimes that's not available. No. The property owner, maybe they're not ready to do something, with their property. And so we've got some large areas that we would love to see in development and through the entitlement process, and we're trying quietly to do, to encourage some of those things, but you can only move as fast as a family or a property owner's motivations for the acreage that they have that's already in the urban service area.
And what if we get a group of elected officials that say, we're done, we don't want more development, we're done. and then the county's expecting that we're gonna do a certain amount of new housing, and our number is pretty big. I mean, I feel like we're one of the top tiered communities that there's an expectation of us to bring new product. That scares me, you know. And then when I heard we're gonna be like shamed by our peer communities, that was like, okay. You know, I just am very passionate about the fact that we really need to work on our housing plan. I mean, we had 54 stakeholders develop that plan. That's almost unheard of. You know, everybody from senior housing to development community to property managers to residents. I mean, and that was, we put a lot of thought and time into how that was gonna happen, how we were gonna roll it out, how this committee, what the makeup of this committee was. Because we wanted to make sure that it wasn't I wanted to have Kurt Paulson on here, because I worked really closely with him on different things, and unfortunately he was running for mayor, but at the time, but that's why we had people that didn't have to be residents on the committee. So we could bring in true experts, and I feel like everybody that's sitting here is an expert and is willing to say, yeah, you guys are headed the right way or no, you know. So anyways, enough of my soapbox.
To Brian's point though about where we have some inconsistencies with things, we've got somebody that wants to do a higher density multifamily proposal on a piece of property, but we can't find a zoning classification that works to meet the level of density that they want there. Because in our high density multifamily zoning, for every efficiency, I think it's 2,000 square feet of land you need. So our high density is very suburban oriented. It's like the former Ridgewood, you know, horizontal build out, you know, lower density spread things out there. So Deanna's, you know, scratching her head right now and is trying to come up with a creative way where we will need to do a zoning ordinance amendment, but they've got a very full plate right now, so they probably aren't gonna be able to get to that until like the first quarter of 2025. So we've got a project that wants to come forward that seems to meet the goals of our comp plan of wanting higher density, but yet our zoning ordinance, you know, contradicts that at this point in time. And so it's a matter of how quickly, again, can we get to some of these things. But we do just need to be a little cautious with overloading our planning staff, because they are doing, you know, a whole bunch of heavy lifting right now, trying to get as much through as they can. And sometimes maybe they don't always get the support of the community of where we're trying to go there. And so people get frustrated because it's taking longer. But that's where maybe you folks as, you know, the elected officials and folks can kind of reinforce and support them to get things through the process, you know, there, and to move forward, because it's a real challenge for us to get we know it needs to be done. It's just a matter of how can we get there and, you know, move some of the updates that we need to do forward in a timely manner here.
And I guess one comment I'll make is we've always wanted to have the alders that are on our committees to be our cheerleader, but how do you get them, how do you force them to do that? You know, we have, I mean, I've been here a long time, we have some that are very engaged like you, and some that just come to the meeting and, you know, so it's hard. And so I'm like, okay, when we did have those, we started working our way through the housing plan and the different goals, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'll write a letter or I'll do a memo to the council and the mayor with the things the outstanding issues that we have discussed. We vetted, the planning department vetted the ADU ordinance for us. We looked at those fees. We put together a memo, we sent it, and it went nowheres, and we thought our alderperson, and maybe I'm just whacked, but I thought our alderperson would be the one to champion and say, hey, this is really important. And it, you know, and Mike and I are one that we just do the work, and maybe it's our own fault because we haven't told the council, but we just assume
Oh, it's okay.
that you guys know what we're doing, because, you know, so we're a little, at least I am. Mike's got a tougher skin than I do, but.
Can we pick up that AUD zoning amendment, like, again? Like, can I? I'm happy
I
to.
think it's out there for the planning department when they do the zoning.
When they're
code.
going, okay, so it's like on
Right.
the.
Yeah, yeah, you know, we got it in smart code, you know, right now, and we wanna see them come forward.
Yeah.
But even there, I think it's a communication and education process, so
Mhm.
too, with builders and developers of, you know, what's that process to get an ADU, you know, through even smart code there? Because it should be a very efficient process there, but we got a situation where maybe there's been a hiccup or two, and we wanna work with folks to see how do we rectify that so it's not a hurdle or not seen as a hurdle.
Yeah.
You know, by folks, because it really should be by right, and that should move through, you know, the process like that.
Yeah. In response to Joyce, what you said, like, I agree. I think that I am a big believer that my role as an alder representative is to bring these conversations, to summarize these conversations to the best of my ability to the council. And I found that over the years, housing in particular, I think it was around since I got on council, or maybe a year after I've been on council, but I don't remember ever getting like in-depth updates of what was happening in conversation. And just to be, the fact of the matter is I just can't watch every meeting as a council person. I just have not been able to do that. So so I think there's been a deficit there, and I look forward to kind of trying to summarize this conversation to the best of my ability and encourage people to watch it. Sometimes it's like sending a link out and being like, here's the discussion, watch it on 2 times speed at YouTube. That's my favorite thing, is you can watch it twice as fast if you
My plan was to invite all of our committee members to come to that COW meeting.
Yes, I would love that.
In case I forget something. I mean, Lorene and I have been trying to go back through minutes, and, you know, because I take a lot of notes, I haven't tonight, but just of all the things that we've talked about and worked on, and, you know, Mike and I have been going back through just our history working together, and, because it's pretty comprehensive, but my thing is I don't want to lose any of my people here. So we've been trying to always keep them engaged with what we're doing, but it is frustrating for this group to put time and effort into the meetings and making recommendations and then not have them go anywheres. You know, we don't want to lose this engagement, because it's not too often you get a group of people like this at a table together that can work on a common goal.
Yeah. And like I said, I think this council's ready to do some work on housing, so I think this is the time to.
When the timing is aligning, you know, we've got, you know,
the
a great staff person now to really dedicate and focus. You know, where Joyce and I were trying to hold things together around the edges, you know, there we've got somebody that can really give it the attention that it deserves.
The other thing that I'll bring up too is I'm on the Plan Commission, which I guess is convenient for me being on both housing and plan, but I think some education of the Plan Commission members about these types of issues would also be helpful. And just like the role of the Plan Commission, I feel like certain committees, like the charge of the committee is very clear. And I think the Plan Commission is one of the is such a challenging committee, because there's so many aspects of stewarding like the city plan, but not a ton of guidance for the people that are on that committee about how to do that in the best way possible, and how to navigate those really challenging topics and those packets that are filled with complex ideas that if you don't have a background in housing or in development or any sorts of nature, it can be challenging to make those assessments and decide whether that aligns with the comp plan and with the plans of the city. And so I think some help and some training or some guidance for the Plan Commission would also be, I think, helpful. And that obviously evolves regularly, but the Plan Commission is a huge piece of it, right? Because
when you try to do an apartment project and the Fitchburg doesn't want anything with vinyl siding, well, why? And the argument is, well, it needs to look like the rest of the market rate apartments. Well, vinyl siding is a very nice product, and according to HUD, it has the same lifetime duration as LP or Smart Side or Cement Side, but LP or Smart Side or Cement Board costs 3 times as much for the product and double as much for the labor to install.
wow.
And our Plan Commission say we gotta have that product on there so it looks nice. Well, maybe that's something we should think about, is not requiring that type of product on, if we're trying to hit goals with affordability or workforce housing, what's wrong with vinyl siding? It lasts 50 years, just like the LP product lasts 50 years.
Yeah.
According to HUD study, so why are we requiring more? Just adds cost.
I know,
Doesn't make it better.
we've been talking about just different,
Just things like that some of the thoughts and the decisions that go into our processes here
Yeah,
are sometimes short-sighted.
we'll go into
And we want
one
to look pretty, we want it to be
neighborhood,
nice and
it's all
fancy,
vinyl
but
siding.
it doesn't hit our goals, so maybe we gotta back off on that in order to hit our goal.
Yeah.
Things like that.
We gotta stop creating barriers. That seems to be the theme of what everything you've said, is that it's barrier after barrier after barrier.
For many, many
Well,
decades,
developers are
Fitchburg
gonna-
became the city of no, not the city of how.
Yeah,
I hate to say it, in the developer world, it was the city of, nope, can't do it in Fitchburg. And so, I mean, I've developed a lot of land in Fitchburg with our family. For 15 years, I went to Verona and developed 200 acres out there with single-family homes and apartments, because I could get it done.
you're
faster.
part of the problem right there, Brian.
I've been trying to do stuff here, as you guys know, is I go to you guys to try to get help with some of the staff, and we just can't get some of it going.
Can you
realtor,
elaborate, just from my knowledge, is it more efficient or is it the cost, or is it both?
It's more efficient time-wise. You get approvals much faster in other municipalities, and they will work with you to say, here's how we can make it work. It might not exactly fit now, but let's see if we can make it work this way.
flexible.
And some of the staff here previously, I mean, we've had a lot of good staff coming into the city now, and I'm starting to see that turning the corner, but for probably 2 decades, it was more the city of, no, you just come back to me when you think you got something else that might work. Well, okay, but you're gonna say no to that, so how can you tell us what you'd like to see? And that was never offered by staff previously. Now, with the development meetings on Tuesdays, it's starting to happen. So it's turning the corner.
Well, we have a
Just not
lot of
there yet.
competition, there's a lot of suburbs around us. And if the other suburbs make it easier and cheaper, the developers are gonna go there, bottom line.
Well, and time costs money. I mean, when you think about having to buy a piece of land if it's 80 acres at 100,000 an acre, that's $8 million. And you gotta hold that for 4 months in Verona, Middleton, Wanakee, Sun Prairie, Stoughton, McFarland. But in the city of Fitchburg, you gotta hold it for almost 2 years. The amount of interest you pay just adds to the cost of the lot. And that's just something that isn't thought about with development. And everybody thinks that developers are gonna just pay the fees, and everybody works on margins. It's how the free market works, is margins. And if the margins don't make it worth the risk, you don't do it.
I mean, I just feel like this is.
You move elsewhere where the market will work and where the market will.
This seems to be the root of the problem here. I mean, is it just me? Maybe as just the realtor in the room, I feel like I'm kind of identifying, why aren't we seeing developers flocking to Fitchburg to build? And I guess there's the answer.
Yeah, I think it's
I
kind of
didn't
started
know
with our
that.
comp plan being pretty restrictive, and then I think some of our zoning has not been updated as fast as some of the other municipalities to allow different product.
Yeah.
Because like Mike said, I mean, I think our smart code, this across the street, this complex was the first smart code where the Meritor building is, and I think that was his first smart code multifamily project, and that was in.
This is PDD over here.
That one is, or which one
Yeah.
is PD?
Uptown was the first smart code
Yep.
neighborhood.
Full neighborhood, but I think there was one piece over here that was the first smart code piece in that development. Where Park Bank is in that piece, that wasn't a PDD, I don't think.
I think it's all part of a general implementation plan, PDD, yeah.
But it hasn't been updated, like I said, since I think the early 90s for the smart code, or late 90s. When was it adopted? 97?
It was early 2000.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, still, that's 20 years.
Yeah.
So,
But I think our code's probably from 1986 when Tom started. Because we went from, and I think part of that's the education too piece, because, when we did our housing plan, I explained to the committee, hey, we're not a typical community. We don't have pre-war housing that, we're flats, and a lot of that's affordable housing. We're so different than anybody else around here. So, and I think sometimes that isn't recognized, when we're being compared to different communities. Now we're starting to get a taste of redevelopment. Before, everything was greenfield and new. So it's just an educational process, I feel like, of where we were. And that's our presentation, past, present, and future housing efforts, because it's kind of, we need to tell the whole story.
So that's at the committee of the whole, when you say your presentation? When is that?
September 25th. And I don't know if anybody's informed you, but we'd like the whole 2 hours.
I think it might be necessary.
There's some referendum stuff you need to do too, but if we
But that
just
should
have
hopefully
most
be
of
a
the
little
time. Yeah.
Because I think we should also not like, I agree, we should talk about it, we should have a conversation. I'm the council president too, for people that don't know, so I organize the committee of the whole meetings. But I think just generally speaking, we should also just keep in mind that I don't know why we always resist having any discussion at council meetings. I understand that we want to keep the agenda moving because they're long, but I think sometimes you can have a 20-minute discussion at a council meeting when something is timely and like can't wait. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Should just always keep that on the radar of, I don't know why we never want to do that. Because there's too much to discuss, and there's a lot to do and not enough time, and committee of the whole sometimes isn't enough.
Too many issues.
Yeah. Right. So, but yeah, let's chat.
Wow. So there you go. Our next meeting's on October 14th then, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
What time does the meeting start?
7 o'clock. Tom.
Ooh, coffee?
Yeah.
Sandra, I'll bring Sandra.
This will be a cocktail meeting.
Wednesday the
So then
25th.
yeah.
I can send you guys a note.
I just added
It's all good.
the calendar.
Okay, all right. Shall I make a motion to adjourn, or can somebody make a motion
So
to adjourn?
moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Who's second? Jenny?
Sorry.
Jenny,
What?
Second the motion. You guys all talk so fast.
Yeah.
Brian made it, who's second?
We're waiting for that.
Oh, okay.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
But what's your discussion? You said you want to say something.
No, did we have any?